various issues related to climate change. And that's because the Center for Global Justice is participating in a community read of Naomi Klein's new book, This Changes Everything: Capitalism versus the Climate. It's an excellent book, and I strongly recommend it to you. We will be having some, in addition to talks and films, we will also be having some discussion groups so that those who are reading the book can come together and share their reactions and questions, etc. The first of those discussion groups will be next week on Friday at 11 o'clock in this room. And the first person then at that session who has read the whole book will get a door prize. This t-shirt from Amazon Watch. So get busy reading if you haven't already. You may be the winner. Okay? Today's speaker is Nicolo Famiglietti, who is a photojournalist. He's written extensively on a number of places in his travels, including Mexico. Later he'll give you his the URL to his website, where you could read some of his articles on Guanajuato, on Oaxaca or something, and as well as his essay on gold mining in Peru, which is the basis of today's talk. So I don't want to take his time by gabbing on anymore. So let me present to you Nicolo Famiglietti.
Thank you. Well, as Cliff told you, my name is, well, actually, my real name is Nicolo Famiglietti, and I often go by name. Today's talk will be about, if everything works, it will be. Today's talk is entitled The Real Cost of Gold. I'd like to ask you, how much do you think it costs to produce gold? What's the energy expenditure worldwide for producing gold? Well, actually, I was thinking in terms of energy expenditure. It's about 10% of all the energy that is expended on the planet Earth goes towards gold mining. How about toxic emissions? How much in the way of toxic emissions do you think we have with gold production? It's a figure that might stagger your imagination. It's 30 to 50%. Now, of course, those emissions go up and down depending on the price of gold. Price goes higher, more exploitation of gold, those emissions go up. So the range is wide, but it's between 30 and 50% of the toxic emissions.
It's going to be really hard to film.
By industry on planet Earth are emitted by the gold industry.
It's like he's in no light.
40% of the world's primal forests are imperiled by gold production. And 1 ounce of gold, because they mine at such infinitesimal levels, that is, the nuggets are gone, placer mining is history. In other words, they go not for nuggets or even particles, but submicroscopic particles. This is how gold is mined today. They call it invisible gold. And to get at that invisible gold, they must move, for 1 ounce, 30 tons of ore. This is the industrial standard. They will, any gold mining company today would love to have ore that has between 3 and 5 parts per million. But it's not uncommon to have mines operating profitably that have 1 part per million. And it's even, under certain circumstances, quite profitable to exploit a mine at 0.5 parts per million. That creates an incredible amount of waste rock. And waste rock they often call overburden. And, well, first you have to get the ore, which is explored by satellite. But then you have to remove, in open pit mining, you have to remove what they call overburden. And that's the rock sitting on top of the gold rich. I'm not sure we should call it gold rich, but gold containing ore. Okay? Like I say, there are mines operating today at 0.5 parts per million. My story is about one particular gold mine and the people struggle to live with it or die by it. My story about gold is a story of courage, betrayal, death, greed, and finally hope. Now what I'd like to do as I tell this story is divide the talk up into 3 sections, if I could. The first section will be the story I have to tell you, and then I know how hard it is to sit in those seats. I've been sitting in them myself. So I think we should have maybe a break, then a question and answer session, and then I have some concluding comments, which I think will wrap this up. Does that suit everybody? Okay, so I'll tell you the story, then we'll have a break, then question and answer. I hope there are questions. I hope I have the answers. Okay. My story opens. Let me see, this is not my computer, so did that come up? Not yet. Okay. There it is. My story opens in Peru, specifically in the northern highlands of Peru. Okay. And the closest large city is Cajamarca. And you can see where it is in relation to Ecuador, Colombia, and of course the Amazon River, which is going to be important in this talk. Because you can imagine that with the ore that needs to be washed with cyanide, by the way, it washes eventually into the tributaries of the Amazon and then into the Amazon itself. Okay. My first night in Cajamarca. I guess I'm going to have to, all right, let me see if I can just advance this. All right, this is the square in Cajamarca. Every town in Peru has a central plaza like this. They call it the Plaza de las Armas there. Anyway, my first night in Cajamarca, I got there at night. Okay, checked into the hotel, started to wander around. This is what I saw. And so my first night, before I'd heard of all of the elements that are going to make up this story, before I'd heard of the Yanacocha gold mine, before I'd heard of the extension to the gold mine, which was the Conga, before I'd heard of Newmont Mining, which is the principal owner of Yanacocha, before I'd heard of Chorapampa or Marco Arana, who is one of the main figures in the fight against dirty gold in that region. Before I heard of all those people, what I did hear was this eerily throbbing chant every night and every day that people would go through the streets chanting, Agua si, mina no, agua si, mina no, agua si, mina no. This is constant throughout the city, every hour, every minute. Agua si, mina no. Water, yes. No to the mine. So, until that moment, and that is, until I had, until walking across the plaza to get a better look at things, I looked across the plaza to La Iglesia La Recoleta. Recoleta meaning peaceful zone or peaceful place. And I walked, before walking over there, I thought a bit about what brought me to Cajamarca. I was writing a book on the invasion and globalization of South America. And Cajamarca was an important place to stop because it was here in 1532 that the Spanish ripped Atahualpa, the last sovereign Incan, from his palanquin, killed his retinue of 6,000 warriors, with cannon, arquebus, and then converted him to Christianity. Oh, they offered him a deal. Listen, you can save your life and you go free if you give us gold and silver. Atahualpa agreed. He filled a room with silver twice, as high as his hand could reach above his head like this. He filled that room again with gold once, and the Spanish changed their mind. They reneged on the deal, and they strangled him with the garrote. Now, this was a good deal for Atahualpa because he'd been converted to Christianity. And if you're a Christian, you don't have to suffer death burned by being burned alive. So this is a great deal, right? Yeah, right. I'd take that deal any day. Okay. So that's what brought me to Cajamarca. Anyone writing a story on South America and its conquest and invasion should probably look to the events that happened here in 1532. Okay, so I walked across that plaza, and I saw a number of things. One of the things I saw were pop tents, and I wondered, what is going on? Well, as you can see there, huelga de hambre, hunger strike. Okay. And a lot of these people, and here's a picture during the day, so you can see a little bit clearer what's going on. These are from the mathematics department. These folks are from the mathematics department of a local university. For some reasons, the mathematicians have run the figures and said, holy smokes, this is not going to work. They're going to destroy everything. And you'll see in a few minutes that they're doing a fairly good job of doing just that. Anyway, a lot of these people, I'm not sure if any actually died because of the hunger strike, but many were taken off to the hospital in ambulances from this scene. Okay? Because they were determined, committed, and they weren't going to walk away on their own 2 feet. They were taken away in ambulances to the local hospital. Okay. This is the La Recoleta. This is the case of La Recoleta. I saw this first at night, and I went back during the day to get a good look at this. By the way, the woman on the far right is wearing traditional dress. That, el sombrero cajamarquino is very, very representative of that region. Okay? As is her dress. Now, the two on the left are Chinese imports. Okay? The lady on the right is wearing locally made clothing with her very famous hat. You'll see lots of things. Una sola voz, Conga no va. We shout in a single voice, Conga is inviolable. Okay? Other protests, there are vehement denunciations of the current president. There are lists of personas non gratas. And here on the far right you see agua y queso sí, oro no. It's a dairy farming region. So they depend on the water to feed and water their cows and to make cheese and other dairy products. In fact, if you walk through town, you'll see a lot of dairy products on display. Well, I first saw this at night again, but a clearer picture. Conga no va, or Congas en Bible. I saw this flag representing the Peruvian flag. The Peruvian flag is striped like this. But instead of the national emblem, of course, they have Conga no va, Viva el Peru. Congas en Bible, long live Peru. And this was fluttering above the entire scene. And the people were shouting, agua sí, mina no, agua sí, mina no. And they had been arrested, and they had been beaten, and they were not going to give up the fight. And so, that brings us to a question. Why this passionate opposition to Conga? Hasn't been built yet, by the way. Well, all of it has to do with the Yanacocha mine, the second largest in the entire world after the Grasberg mine in Papua in eastern Indonesia, the province of Papua in eastern Indonesia. So I think it's appropriate to, the people have been burned, okay? They know what's coming if the Yanacocha mine is extended to include the Congo region. So this is a satellite photo of the second largest gold mine in the world. As you can see, it's quite extensive. This, like I said, a satellite photo, so it's easily seen from outer space. Okay? It's a big operation. How big? Well, the area cordoned off as mine property is about 607 square miles. Okay? Actual operations, the pits, and the terrace mine itself, all those cover about 60 square miles or so. And that's what that region looks like. Okay? Those 60 square miles of operation look like this. I'll show you a few more photos so you can get the idea. Here's a panoramic shot. Another panoramic shot. It's really pretty big, isn't it? Here's an aerial photograph. By the way, that's what's left of the Andes, okay, in this region. These were mountains. They were mountains with alpine lakes and streams and rivers. Do you see any lakes, streams, rivers, lakes in that photo? Of course, Yanacocha, being a very respectful of the environment, has promised to restore it, just like it used to be. In fact, there are mines in the world that are 5,000 years old. Mining, they estimate that mining probably started to take place about 7,000 years ago. But they have mines, they discovered mines 4,000 to 5,000 years old, which still yield toxic emissions. In other words, if Newmont Mining Corporation pulls out, who's going to assume the cost for cleaning up the water, for the water that now runs through plastic tubes? Who's going to assume all those costs? Well, probably the people of the region, but they don't have the money for it. Okay. So the Yanacocha mine, by the way, is located at about between 12 and 14,000 feet. So it's high up in the northern Andes, the northern highlands of Peru. Like I say, looking towards El Vertiente Oriental, which is the eastern slope, and then descending into the Amazon. Well, I've already told you that it's that the entire mine occupies 607 square miles. Actual operation is 60 square miles. How many tons of earth do you think they can move in a day? Any estimates?
10 million?
What, 10 million? It's a little high. Actually, they're much more modest than that. About 600,000 tons of earth are moved a day. Okay, and how do they do that? Well, they have these massive machines. Here's another view of the mine. Oh, by the way, I think it's important to see what the area used to look like. This is Paramo, okay, high meadowland in the Andes. This is one of the lakes. In fact, Yanacocha means black lagoon or black lake. This is what it looked like before. Did you see any black lakes here? Where are the lakes? No lakes. But maybe they'll put in a reservoir, as they promised. They're going to put in a reservoir, they said, when they finish it all up. Okay. So I've shown you the colossal rip, those pictures of the open pit mine, with all the overburden removed. And I've shown you what that looks like. And in this colossal rip, or within this colossal rip, roll machines like this. This, by the way, is a 797F, has a little F kind of behind it. You don't see it there. 797F Caterpillar. Okay. 400 tons. It can carry 400 tons. I think it might be, remember I mentioned, or I think I mentioned that the gold mining industry guzzles energy. 10% of the world's energy is devoted towards gold mining. Well, this sort of breaks it down a little bit to the truck level. Price of the truck, $5 million. Price per tire? Take a good look at the price per tire. I mean, this is the salary of a fairly well-paid person in the United States before taxes. It's $42,500 per tire. Okay. Fuel consumption? Wouldn't you love to drive this baby off the lot? 0.3 miles per gallon. Okay. Capacity, as I mentioned, 400 tons. That gets you away towards your 600,000 tons per day. Get your ways towards your 600,000 tons per day. These are big. They're really big. So this gives you an idea at the truck level how much energy is being expended for your 1 ounce of gold. Okay. So these are the trucks then. This is some of the hardware that moves 30 tons of rock for each ounce of gold. And each year, the mine consumes 17 million metric tons of water. Those lakes you saw, gone. They drained them. Okay? Now, the ore must be processed. Okay? Because remember, the submicroscopic particles, really tiny, tiny little things. And gold is insoluble, or nearly. There are a couple of things gold can be dissolved in. Well, there are three actually that I can think of. One is mercury. That's why you have mercury amalgamation, because mercury will dissolve it, and then you boil off the mercury to get the gold. That's the process they used to use here in colonial Mexico and beyond. Okay? They use mercury amalgamation to get gold from hard rock, crushed hard rock. There's another thing it will do. Nitrohydrochloric acid, also called aqua regia, will dissolve in that, and it will dissolve in cyanide. They found that out in 1783. In fact, I think, and then they discovered that it had to have oxygen. That's what water comes in, okay? And it has to be an aqueous solution, so it must be water and cyanide. Okay? Guess what? You 17 million metric tons. You've got to put that cyanide laced water somewhere after you use it, right? Well, that's what the peasants are thinking about. So, this process, okay, this you can see, this is one of the access roads and one of the big trucks, 400 tons. This is what they call a heap leach pad. Some of these pyramids of heap crushed rock are as big as the pyramids in Giza. And of course, this is what they sprinkle the cyanide over. Actually, they don't sprinkle it, it's drip irrigation. But you can imagine at 17 million metric tons, there's a lot of water being used. There's also a great deal of cyanide being used. They sprinkle with a great deal of cyanide. How much? The gold production industry uses 13% of industrial cyanide every year. Okay? The other 87% goes for the production of plastics, what else? Adhesives, and pesticides. But 13% goes to the gold mining industry, and across the world, 90% of gold miners, those involved in gold production, rely on the cyanide leaching technology. In other words, drip irrigating these huge, huge pyramids of crushed rock. Okay. It's a little distracting. There's someone taking photographs in the room. This is a lecture.
I apologize.
No problem. Okay. So as I said, 13% of cyanide worldwide is devoted to gold mining. And this is the height of new technology, believe it or not. Okay. This, by the way, is the gold suspended in the aqueous solution of, I believe, Yanacocha uses potassium cyanide. That's what they use. Okay. So they'll use a cyanide salt dissolved in water, potassium cyanide. By the way, that, as you can see, the sun's shining, but there's no reflection in the water. It's full of gunk. Truly. The potassium, okay, so they use cyanide leaching to leach the gold out of the crushed rock, and then it goes into the pregnant pond, that is, it's pregnant with gold. Okay, gold that is now in the solution of potassium cyanide and dissolved out. Okay, and the peasants, the dairy farmers, you see one of the farmers in the area with his mule or horse and his milk cans. These people say it's contaminated. They say the water's not the right color, that it tastes funny. They also say a lot of other things, that the animals are sickening and dying, that their teeth are falling out of their head, that some children are born with defects. They say that water leaks. Okay. And they say that trout have disappeared. You know, it's strange. If you go through many parts of the Andes where the water is still clean, it's really easy to get a trout dinner or lunch. It's everywhere. You can't miss it. But not here. No fish on the plate, and certainly no trout. Okay. Now, I'll go back here. Now, Newmont Corporation is the principal owner, the principal stakeholder, a little bit over 50%. And they're in partnership with Buenaventura, a Peruvian company, 40-something%. And believe it or not, 5% of the mine is owned by the World Bank. To the tune of, well, a puny $150 million is what their investment was. But the World Bank can then claim that they put through some highways, they made some improvements, and this is a good thing for humanity. The peasants would not agree. They say the water is contaminated. Well, Buenaventura and Newmont Corporation might say, well, they drink Class 3 water. They shouldn't be drinking Class 3 water. Now, Class 3 water is water with too much potassium traces, too much in the way of cyanide traces to be drinkable. In other words, it will kill you or come pretty damn close to doing so. So, but there's a guy named Reinhard Seifert, actually, who I would learn a great deal more about later on while I was in Cajamarca. And he is an environmental engineer, born in Germany, but now permanently settled in Cajamarca, Peru. And he says there's no Class 1 or Class 2, in other words, potable and relatively potable water, anywhere near the vast theater of operations which you saw on the aerial and satellite photographs. So, that's Mr. Seifert. Peasants used to drink water from streams like this. Just cup their hands, scoop it up, and have a drink. Oh boy, that's some big right there. It's hay crop, steak crop, no longer. No one drinks water like this from the streams anymore, because there aren't any streams. Remember those disappeared mountains? The mountains are no longer there? Well, the streams went with them. Okay? the streams, the rivers, the Black Lagoon or Black Lake, Yanacocha, it's not there. So, they have a better idea. This is their idea. So they pump the water from under the ground, from aquifers, okay, through plastic tubes and into Rio Grande, the great river. That's, by the way, that's the riverbed. See, there's nothing in it. It's gone. The water's gone. They're pumping it from underground, and they're pumping it into the dry, stony riverbed. And they're calling this an improvement, a great improvement, because they're all for development. And the people and the peasants say it's contaminated, it kills, and we don't like it. So water today comes to the city of Cajamarca when they can get it. Sometimes there are parts of the city where there are only 2 hours of flow of water per day. You have to schedule your shower, your cooking, whatever, when that water flow is just 2 hours a day. Now, peasant claims and internal audits notwithstanding, Yanacocha presents a different, sunnier side of what mining in the Andes is like. What does Yanacocha say? Well, I haven't been able to, I searched and searched and searched and couldn't find his website again. I was able to access it in Portland, Oregon in English, but the only one I could find down here was the one in Spanish. Nonetheless, when I investigated their site up there, they had wonderful pictures, you know, of a guy in a respirator and an orange protective suit, and he was fencing in to keep the llamas away from the mining territory, and they all looked very, very pastoral and idyllic. And of course, the little caption under that picture was, "Mining that respects the environment." Seriously, okay? There was another picture, also very idyllic, very pastoral, and they claim to be an important factor in the local communities. Well, there are some things they're not telling you about what their activity has generated in the local community. One is prostitution. Prostitution, houses of prostitution, because of the influx of people from outside, have proliferated, and the people have risen up and driven the prostitutes and the pimps and the owners of the house out of the city. But this they're having to do on a regular basis so the prostitutes keep coming. They have, you know, they said they are involved in community development. Well, the fishing industry is dead because all the fish are dead. And the dairy industry is in peril because people know what's happening in Yanacocha and Cajamarca and they won't buy their dairy products. So community development, how are they helping economic development if they're destroying local industry? Their third picture had a caption of efficiency. The efficiency and safety of our processes are our #1 priority. Well, interesting what's missing. No mention whatsoever of all the dead trout. No mention whatsoever. Oh, there is one mention of geomembrane. Let's see if I can find. I'll get back to it. No, the trout are dead. This is near the Yanacocha line. No fishing industry and no trout on anyone's plate. This is how they protect the water supply. This is called geomembrane. It's just basically a very sophisticated plastic tarp, isn't it? Okay. Minimum industry standards are 1.5 millimeters. It must be at least 1.5 millimeters thick. Now, imagine that there are, remember that big pyramid of rocks? It sits on top of this. Remember those big machines? Well, they're operating in the vicinity. And they dump those big pyramids of rock on top of this. You really can't dismiss the possibility of leakage or rupture of this membrane. And also on their site, there's no mention, despite the fact that it made world news, of the Churupampa disaster. Okay, Churupampa has about 3,500 inhabitants. It's located about 53 miles southwest of Yanacocha. and there were trucks. Well, this is what happened. This is one of the pictures where I want to show what happened. There was a truck carrying a number of canisters, all filled with 150 kilograms of liquid mercury, right? Mercury in its liquid state. It was strewn along the highway for about 25 miles, all between 3 towns. Now the people rushed out, they say, to collect it. Some because they thought it might have medicinal healing properties, according to folk legend. Some because they thought it contained residual amounts of gold. Remember, a gram of gold is a fortune for some of these people. A gram of gold brings in a lot of money at today's prices, or at least at the prices back then. I'm not sure how far it's fallen in the meantime. However, and then of course, how do you get rid of the mercury? Well, mercury vaporizes at higher temperatures. It actually starts vaporizing at room temperature. But if you heat it on the stove, it vaporizes even quicker. Well, mercury vapor is highly toxic, really highly toxic. Membrane damage, genetic defects, I mean the list goes on, leukemia. So suppose maybe they took it in there. Some people think that they were also paid to clean up. Of course, you see the mine workers, when they handle mercury, they have these heavy suits on and respirators. They would not get anywhere close to it without protection. Well, if these people were indeed hired to clean it up, there were no protection suits. So they collected with their bare hands. Now, the peasants then were directly exposed to the mercury. They had first symptoms were headaches, nosebleeds, hair loss, blindness, leukemia, coma, and some were left paralyzed for life. Just like in Minamata. Do you remember those horrible photos from the Minamata disaster where they dumped something like 100,000 tons of mercury into the Bay of Minamata in Japan? And you remember those horrible pictures of the horribly deformed children? It's like that. Not quite as extensive, because this is the spill of just one canister. And by the way, accidents do happen. Of a truck carrying cyanide that ended up in a riverbed, fell off the highway, ended up in the riverbed. It was Yanakocha's truck. Now, fortunately, the cyanide, there were no leaks, no punctures, and the cyanide did not pour into the riverbed. But this is what, even adhering to the highest safety standards, these things happen. These are vast operations. Anyway, this is one of the women they made fun of on national television. He said, it's impossible for these symptoms to go on manifesting themselves. They're short-lived at best. We think the people are suffering from mass hysteria. This was on national television. The people are dying, and they go, you can understand why the people are not very fond of the national press. Here's a baby with skin rashes. A child. So it's the same. Memory loss, paralysis, coma, premature death. Now, at the time, Mr. Fujimori was president, and the chief of his spy agency for internal intelligence was the famous or infamous Mr. Montesino. Anyway, he also had within his cabinet a minister for women's affairs. And when this happened in Choropampa, he sent Senora Cuculisa to Choropampa to talk with the citizens there. And she delivered an impassioned message on behalf of President Fujimori. And his message was, Minister, and she quoted him, Minister, tell the citizens of Choropampa that I personally will see to it that no one remains sick in Choropampa. A pledge by President Fujimori. 3 months later, Fujimori was on the lam. He was in exile in Japan, fleeing charges of corruption, human rights abuse. Isn't that a nice, lovely term for murder? In other words, he had people liquidated and they call it human rights abuse. I think that's shades of newspeak here. And so there he was in Japan, and this all happened following the release of the infamous Vladi tapes and Vladimir Montesinos, right? He was the chief of of intelligence in Peru. And also he was in the pay of the CIA, supposedly to fight El Sendero Luminoso. So he was receiving money from the CIA, and he was monitored by Army intelligence. Anyway, on these tapes, they caught Montesinos handing not chunks of cash or bricks of cash, but shopping bags full of cash. It's on tape. You know, just handling bricks of cash. You know, take this, Mr. Congress. Take that, Mr. Congress. And don't forget your friend, Mr. Montesinos. Okay. As I said, Mr. Montesinos, spy chief, was being monitored by Army intelligence in the United States, but did want to know where their money was going, right, and what it was being used for. Anyway, while this was going on, Army intelligence had a number of names for Montesinos. They called him Torquemada, Cardinal Richelieu, Darth Vader, Rasputin. In fact, someone in Army intelligence said, it's like all of them rolled into one. It was a very bad man. Okay. Anyway, Fujimori and Montesinos are both in prison for 25 years on human rights abuse, but also for smuggling, embezzlement, selling arms to the FARC in Colombia. Just a laundry list of things in the interest of the Peruvian people. So, these two fellows were in jail, and their promises, of course, were null and void. There was nothing they could do to help the people of Chorapampa or anywhere else. So the people took things into their own hands in 2004. And that would have been there's Mr. Fujimori. By the way, that's Senora Kukulisa, the Minister of Women's Affairs. That's Mr. Fujimori. That's Mr. Montesinos, Darth Vader. And that's Serokilish. In 2004, the people braved police trenches, they braved police gas and water cannon and everything they could throw at them. And they shut Yanacocha down. Yanacocha wanted this sacred place with its water and with its land, and they wanted it because there's gold there. Microscopic gold, submicroscopic gold. And the people faced them down and they won in 2004. Meanwhile, the agony of Chorapampa continued. This fellow, he was mayor of Chorapampa in the year 2000. His name is Lot Sabreda. And he was mayor of the city where there's 3,500 inhabitants where this disaster took place. And as mayor, and as a concerned citizen, and as a good man, he was in the streets of Lima with his megaphone shouting and causing a stir and trying to bring attention to the plight of these people. Their case was being thrown out of courts in the U.S. They tried to mount a class action suit, and they tried to sue Newmont in Colorado. And the U.S. courts were throwing it out, saying, no, you must go back to Peru and do this. Can you imagine them getting justice in Peru for their complaints? Anyway, there he was, and he was arrested, and he was tried, and he was sentenced to 3 years in jail for bringing. However, the sentence was suspended, but the warning was clear: shut up. This is the mayor that came after Lot Sabreda. He didn't last very long. He died at 34. And he suffered, so they say, from Guillain-Barré disease. And Guillain-Barré disease is not, he was mayor of Chorapampa, so he was there exposed to the mercury. Now that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to talk over that. He suffered from Guillain-Barré disease, and as I say, it's really distracting. I'm having a tough time. Maybe it's not.
I usually ask them to move.
I But I can't keep my mind focused. There's a lot that happened in this story.
Are all those your photographs?
No, some are mine, but a lot of these, for instance, this funeral shot, the satellite photographs and such, I didn't get those.
What in the open pit mine?
No, these I just thought these showed better what I wanted to convey here. I do have a photographic site. I can give you the link where everything is mine, and I do have photographs from the marches and other photographs as well. So anyway, this fellow, his last name is leaching, he would have died at 34. He died of Guillain-Barré disease, which they really can't trace definitively to mercury poisoning. However, he also suffered horribly from paresthesia, a numbing and tingling of the nerves, and motor coordination he suffered from. Now this is directly traceable to mercury poisoning.
Forgive me for this question, but is that porous enough to come through? It's on his burial garments.
Excuse me?
That he has the same kinds of spotting on his.
It sort of looks. I'm not sure what that is because the spots are also on the suit, so it may have been
That's what I was
some
alluding
dirty
to
glass.
with this.
That's what I think.
If
I
there's-
don't think necessarily that, I'm not sure that he's showing any symptoms here,
Mhm.
but he is very dead.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the peasants' case was repeatedly turned away in the United States, wouldn't be heard in Peru, they were made fun of television. You can imagine that the people really feel as if people are turning their backs on them, as if they can't be heard, as if no justice will ever be done. And a few years later, Newmont proposed the Congo extension. Now we've seen how big the Yanacocha mine is. Congo is going to be several times bigger than Yanacocha. It's an extension, but several times bigger. Now why would they? Well, they project, and they have good reason to, because they have satellite exploration, they have geophysicists, they have geologists. Anyway, they're predicting 12 million ounces of gold, 3 million pounds of copper, 17 years life for the mine, with an initial investment of $4.8 million. Maybe even the World Bank will kick in on this one, who knows? And as I say, it will be even bigger at Yanacocha. At issue, you guessed it, is water. There are 4 alpine lakes up there. They will disappear just as the Black Lagoon or the Black Lake, Yanacocha, did. And the peasants don't want that. Okay, so Yanacocha wants to drain the lakes to get the gold beneath, and they also want to use it as a tailings pond. Now, a tailings pond isn't, okay, now tailings just aren't waste rock. No, it's a toxic slurry that contains everything: arsenic, lead, sulfuric acid. When you expose the rock in the mountain and rain drips on it, like the cyanide drip method, guess what? The sulfides are converted into sulfuric acid. Okay? So sulfuric acid and mercury. Okay? There's a great deal of mercury. Now, mercury deserves special mention because mercury is inseparable from gold mining. In fact, so much is produced it doesn't make sense anymore to have mines devoted to mercury exploitation alone. Okay, so they're producing megatonnage of mercury, or many, many tons of mercury every year. They're putting it in canisters like Yanacocha did, sending it down the highway into the port, often to Lima or other places so they can use it in medical instruments. Well, the medical instrument industry using mercury has been saturated. There's no place for it to go. So what are they going to do with those canisters of mercury? They're probably going to have to store them as hazardous waste, much like they do with the spent plutonium rods in the nuclear industry. That's how much mercury is being produced. At the same time, in Algeria and Spain and other countries in the world, they have functioning mercury mines whose only function is to remove mercury from the ground. There's a lot of mercury out there. These are the people at Conga. Okay, this protest against Conga has been going on. They spent the night there, and their ponchas, and in their very characteristic hats, and they're not ready. I think if I can access it, I told you about mine tailings. I'm going to have to leave this, probably this for a second, and go all the way down, because I think you need to know a little bit about mine tailings to understand how destructive the industry. Okay, let's hope this works. This is a chronology of mine. Okay, we're not getting the full picture here. If this were my computer, I'd have a little bit more luck with it. I don't know how to expand this. Just try that. No. Okay. Well, I'm just going to have to do the best I can. Anyway, mine tailings disasters are not history. They're with us every day. There was one in August of last year, 2014, pretty big one in Canada. You know, they always say, well, you know, when you talk about gold mining, you're talking about the third world, and 70% of gold mining does take place in the third world. There's a where there's corruption and regulations are laxer, but disasters happen in the first world too. Okay? And they happen in Europe, in Central Europe, Romania, Baia Mare, year 2000, 300,000 tons of fish were destroyed. Now cyanide degrades in sunlight. Okay? So it's biodegradable, so to speak, but it's extremely toxic. So anything it touches, as it courses down the rivers and the tributaries of the river, is killed immediately. Algae, plankton, fish, anything's in the river. People can get away because they can walk away, but not so the animals. Anyway, this list is endless, and it actually shows you something like 100 mining disasters, tailings disasters that have taken place since the 1960s alone, when they first started to record keeping. I'm sorry I can't expand this. I can move it here, and you can see a little bit more information. And if anyone wants this, of course, I'll be glad to provide it. Let's get back to the pictures if we can. So anyway, so, not that. How do we get back to the pictures? Let's see here. Okay.
Pull the bar up.
Yeah, I have just want to get back to the pictures I was showing. Okay, there we go. Now this is a tailings mine. Okay, now remember this is filled with arsenic, sulfuric acid, lead, mercury, and cyanide. Remember, cyanide is one of the most dangerous chemicals found in here. If that breaks, and they do, remember, this is in the Andes. This is an earthquake region. And a lot of the minings, remember I showed you that list just now of 100 tailings disasters throughout the world? Well, a lot of them were set loose by earthquakes. So that dam breaks, and it all comes pouring out. But no worry, it's biodegradable. It'll just kill everything it touches, but then will degrade. I think I read once that something like within 16 days, 16% of the Danube tributaries and Danube River, they had already been reestablished. Life was growing again after 16 days. But everything was killed. Okay? It was making a comeback. So eventually, someday, life will return to those rivers that have been so horribly contaminated. However, in the meantime, everything is dead as a doornail. Okay, so at Isha Congo then are the 4 alpine lakes. So this is the situation I stumbled into. Atahualpa killed in 1532 after giving away all of the gold of the empire, or a great deal of it at least. Remember those rooms? Remember, gold was pretty gold wasn't very plentiful in the Americas. I mean, they didn't know it was very plentiful, but it was all underground. A lot of the mining, a lot of the beautiful ornaments from the Aztecs and the Incas were from placer mines. In other words, they had found nuggets or they had found grains, and then it would all come out of the floating sand and earth and into the bottom of the pans by the work of gravity. They rolled it around, and gravity pulled out this very, very dense gold. By the way, gold is so dense that Newmont Mining Corporation will give each and every one of you, or any one of you, a gold bullion, if you can pick it up with one hand. But nobody can. Why is that? Well, gold's density is about twice that of lead. It's twice as dense as lead. So to pick up a gold bullion with one hand is impossible. No one's ever won the bet, but if you want to walk into Newmont Corporation, take them over, they'll let you have at it. In fact, there's a video where, the beaming executives there, this is 19 million ounces, the celebration, the 19 million ounces, which is a lot of gold, by the way. And no one's picking it up. So anyway, Atahualpa killed, after being promised that he would live. Atahualpa killed, strangled, mercifully, after being converted to Christianity. The Chorapampa disaster, where the world turned a deaf ear to the victims. Okay, the streams, which had ceased to exist, along with the water that they bore. Cerro Quilich, where the people had won in 2004, and the Congo extension, which has everybody up in arms. This is what the situation I confronted in June of 2012. Here's a picture of one of the daily marches. As you can see, one of their slogans, Agua sí, you know. And these marches, and you see lots and lots of people. Okay? And this was an everyday affair. So many people were taken to the streets at every hour, every day, that you could actually breathe the air in this city in Peru. Now, this is quite a statement, because the air is chokingly filled with particulate matter. You cannot breathe it, usually. I mean, it's just, I've taken pictures of this, and there is so much dust and particles in the air that it's unbelievable. However, the air was relatively clean here because there were no cars. They could not get through these thick crowds. Okay. The daily marches. Okay, and every day, here's one. I thought, this is another crowd scene I took. Mineros cachulos. Cachula, of course, means coupled. And evidently there are enough toxins in the mining industry, yanacocha, that it renders some of the miners impotent. Although Yanacocha may not admit to it, I think they just discovered secret documentation that was buried in a room someplace, and in fact they do have statistics about the number of impotent miners. Anyway, and so the joke here, according to the Citizens on Parade, is, it says, because they're impotent, their wives go to consort with others instead of with the men they're married to. And that's why they're calling them coupled or horned, right? And then, of course, yanacochinos, which means a play on words, Yanacocha meaning Black Lagoon, and Yanacochinos meaning the pigs that work for Yanacocha Mining. Okay? All right. Another daily march. This is near the International Bank. I just thought that was very interesting. This is typical. I mean, this is just a march at midday. And that's in front of La Recoleta, the church I mentioned so many times. And there's a mass gathering here. Now the strikers gather and they hear the denunciations of President Humala. Okay, now why are they dead set against this fellow? This is President Humala, the current president of Peru. Why don't they like this fellow too much? Well, he came and worked the crowds in Cajamarca. And his message was, water before gold. Water first. Your livelihood before gold mining. The people of Cajamarca first, always. And As you can see, that's not the first time he came either. He also put on the regional poncho and the tall hat of the Cajamarquinos. I said, I'm one of you. I am with you. Okay? When the trouble started, here was his response. The federal police. And people died. And people were beaten. And people were arrested. Okay? This was his response after only a few months in office. After promising in his campaign that water and the people of Cajamarca would always come first. This was his response. This is in Bambamarca, not very far from Cajamarca. As you can see, the army is being called in. So this is why, and his supporters call the people of Cajamarca and the Cajamarca region, the city of Cajamarca is called Cajamarca, and the entire province is called Cajamarca. Okay. So that was his response, and his supporters call these people dupes and drunks, the people who are out in the streets protesting. They're dupes and drunks. Well, there must be a lot of dupes and drunks because they did a poll. A very good poll by a very good polling agency. And they found within the city limits about 78% of the people were against Conga. Okay? They went into the countryside and they found 85%. Okay? And within the city there were about 15% for the mine and about 7% who didn't have an opinion. But the overwhelming majority were people with an opinion, and they said no to the mine. Well, I don't think they're dupes and drunks, not based on my experiences. I walked into, this is an impromptu or makeshift soup kitchen, okay, meant to sustain the people participating in the strike. This is one of the women who come from the countryside to do what she can, to cook, to make life as comfortable as possible on the flagstone courtyard of La Recoleta. And they actually offered me a bowl of soup too, but a little bit later, when I came in, they were all looking at me like this. Who is this guy and what does he want? And of course, I took the precaution of hiding my camera because I didn't want them thinking that I was there to do what others had done, which was spy on them and then deliver a bad report. Okay? So anyway, I met at this very place a woman named Vilma, and I was struck by a number of things. Her articulateness. She was a beautifully spoken woman. Okay. Her poetry. I mean, she spoke of her life in the countryside, the singing birds, the animals she lived with. She spoke of them in poetic terms. And when she spoke of what was happening, she said, "Do you know what's happening to our water? Do you have any idea?" First, she said, "Do you know how long we've been here? Do you know how long we've been here?" And then, well, she said, "Since March we've been here. Every night on the ground, we've been here since March." And it was already June by this time. And we're not going anywhere until they cancel Conga. That's how committed we are. And she told me about Pateollas. She said, "Do you know how they treat us? You want to know how they treat us?" And she took out a sheaf of papers, and there was cartoon soup spilled all over. In other words, recreating this scene in cartoon. In fact, these could be police. They're disguised as civilians, it looks like here, or are they not? Yeah, it looks like they're disguised as civilians. These could be police. The police often have extra jobs. Okay, they might be federal police during the day, and private security guards at Yanacocha by night. They might be hired thugs. Okay? And these are the scenes they'd have to endure over and over again in their struggle. Anyway, listening to this woman, she says, "Do you know what happens to the water? Our animals sicken and die. Our children are born with defects. We ourselves are sick. The water's not right. They send it to us back full of garbage. Okay? Through those black plastic tubes, they send the water, our water, back to us full of garbage." And she says, "You know where that water goes? It goes to the Atlantic and it goes to the Pacific." And she knew her geography, and she knew exactly where the water was going to end up. And this is a peasant woman from no education, and she spoke beautifully, poetically, and she knew the way the world works. So I don't think she was either a dupe or a drunk. And neither was this fellow, Marco Rena, a Catholic priest. He was a Catholic priest for only 2 years before the Peruvian church, or the church in Peru, looked at him and said, you need to cool off. He was out there on the front lines, making sure people got a fair price for land that was taken, or out of which they were bamboozled, or whatever the case may be, and he tried to get a fair price for them. Okay? And also he's outspoken. He's quoted in Time magazine not so long ago, and he said, there will be no gold objects in our parish, because anything that destructive shouldn't be part of our worship of the Lord. So Marco Rena's a troublemaker. The Catholic Church in Peru recognized this and said, Marco, you got a problem. We're sending you to Rome for a while. We think you should cool off. Well, he got to Rome, and you know what he did? He looked at the ceiling of one of the churches there, and Peruvian legend says that this gold came from America. Anyway, he looked at the gold, he looked at the gold gill on the ceiling, the coffered ceiling. I think I have a picture of that. There it is. And that is, he looked at that and said, that's American gold, that's Peruvian gold. Well, this may be a legend, because that coffered ceiling was actually gilded sometime before the conquest of Peru. But anyway, the message was clear. I should be back in Peru fighting for the people who are fighting against the gold mine. And so he came back to Peru. And you can imagine he was very, very much welcomed by the Peruvian government, by the federal police, and other people who loved him dearly. Now, this would happen a few days before I left, but he was surrounded by shield-wielding policemen. Hands up, he was carted off to jail. Very active, he's running for president. Okay, got into it. Now why did I choose that moment to leave Peru? Why didn't I stay for the fatal crescendo? Let me see, am I getting ahead of myself? Okay, yeah. Well, I called it quits after about three and a half weeks or so, because I had been threatened with bodily harm. I was taking photographs of these women. Okay, here's one of them. Here's another. I was taking photograph after photograph of the women in the parade, or the demonstration, I should say. And I looked up from the viewfinder, and I found myself surrounded by half a dozen people, one man and lots of women dressed like this, with their shepherd's goad, with their flag, with their pole with the green flag at the end. And they weren't impolite, but they were very dead set in finding out what the hell I was doing there. So they asked me questions. What are you doing? What's the meaning of this, and where are you from? And I told them as best I could, and I told them that I was doing my best to be one of the few outsiders to chronicle this event, that I wanted to get the message back to the world, and I was going to do that by first sending photographs to university colleagues back in the United States. And the man who was a spokesman for the group looked at me and said, which university? And I told him, well, I had worked at Willamette University, so I told him Willamette University. And I was sure he was going to ask for ID, which I didn't have. And he didn't ask for anything. Anyway, then a woman pipes up. She's one of the women in the group, and she said, how do we know you're telling the truth? And what if you are? You know, they send spies down here all the time to tell lies about us. Says, you better be telling the truth. If not, this hurts. And she whacked me on the leg with her shepherd's goad. I can tell you they hurt. Now, this was just a foretaste of what could happen if I wasn't telling the truth. So her message was, you better be telling the truth. And, well, so let me see here. So who are those 15% in the city of Cajamarca who support Conga? Well, there are people like this. This is Walter, I call him, not his real first name, but it's very close. He's the son of a Jehovah's Witness from England and a Peruvian police captain. And he's a shop owner. He sells artisanal goods, weavings and such. And his business prospers whenever people come in to buy. Prostitutes prosper. Hotel managers, they do well. And hotel employees. Anyone in the tourist trade, which is dead right now, Cajamarca, but anyone who's based in town, whenever there's an influx of people, they do well. And of course, miners bring money. A lot of those fellows in the mine are fairly well paid, especially by local standards. And they bring you money and they want to spend it. It's not really pleasant being in the sun in one of those big trucks all day long. You want to let loose when you come to town. And you let loose by opening the wallet. Now these people benefit, and they want the mine. Okay. So I met him when I used to go up to Santa Baronia. That's a little park at the top of the city. It's about 8,900 feet above sea level. And you can look out and see the relatively pristine hillside. They have not been ravaged as the Yanacocha area has been. Okay. So one day I stopped in at his shop. It was probably, I was on my way down from Santa Polonia that I stopped in his shop probably the last time I was there. And this is where the name of the essay comes in. He said, he usually greeted me with, agua no, mina si. Water no, we want the mine. Because he's in favor of the mine. And he usually greeted me with an ironic greeting. And that day, just about my last night there, he said, he didn't greet me that way. He just said, things are heating up. And I said, what do you mean things are heating up? He says, they've approved the environmental impact statement. Conga is going through. In other words, Conga ba. And I said, what will happen now? And he looked at me, and his eyes were glistening with emotion. He said, habrá muertos. Habrá muertos. There will be dead. And he was right. These are 3 of the coffins of the people killed in Saladin, not so far from Cajamarca. Remember, the whole province is up and against this mine. Okay, so this is in another city. And this is where the people were killed, including a 17-year-old boy, and all of them were killed by police bullets. They've done the forensic research. Okay. And you see how many people showed up for the parading of the coffins through the streets. I think that's what he told me. He said, of course there will be dead. They want to be able to parade the coffins through the streets. And so they did. So the next day, just shortly before I left, I was walking in the street on the edges really of a rather unsettled mob. They were, agitated. Anyway, a woman comes up to me in European dress, and she says, "Are you Reinhard Seifert?" I didn't know what she was talking about. Reinhard who? Because this is before I'd ever heard of him. And she insisted a couple of times, but politely, then walked away. The man ranting in German. I mean, he was just really going at it. He said, "You're him. You'll get yours." I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" So I said, he was actually stepping on my hiking boots. Saliva was being sputtered into my face. He was screaming. He was on top of me. And he said, "You're him. You'll get yours. You'll get yours." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, and I said, "Oh my gosh, this is a case of mistaken identity." Anyway, eventually he tired of this. I kept putting him off. No, you don't know who you're talking about. Anyway, he walked away a few paces. I was relieved, and I said, oh no, there's something wrong here. There's something really wrong. So I took out my driver's license, shoved it, ran up to him, shoved it in his face and said, look at this. I'm not the guy you think I am. He said, he couldn't see it. I mean, his eyes were filled with tears of rage. He couldn't read the driver's license, which was expired, by the way. I had been in South America that time for a little while. So he just said, whatever, you'll get yours. So that night, my very last night in Cajamarca, I walked up to Walter's place, like I said, on my way to the park at the top of the city, and I said, Walter, who is this guy, Reinhard Seifert? And he said, oh, Seifert, he was the guy who was beaten by 60 ronderos. The ronderos are the enforcers. Big tall hats, ponchos, community men, and if you betrayed the cause or they suspect you betrayed the cause, they will damn near beat you to death. Which was almost my fate. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Anyway, he looked at me in the eye, leaned a little bit closer and said, you kind of look like him. Your teeth are better. Of course, I had a few knocked out. And he's much older than you are, but you kind of look like him. If you'd like to keep your teeth, maybe you should leave town. Which was beginning to seem like a very good idea to me. And I went by the hotel that very night, told them I was thinking about checking out, and asked them about what happened the last time. Of course, the fight against coal has been going on for a while. And I believe it was just 6 months before, the city had been shut down for 11 entire days. No food or water came in. People were killed, arrested, beaten, press vans on fire all over the place. And I thought, I think my time here has run out. And that's about the time I left. Now, there's a short epilogue to this. I'd just like to catch you up with a few of the characters after I left town. President Humala condemned the march of pregnant women. Pregnant women should not be marching against the mine. It's unseemly. Of course, they're marching because they are pregnant and they want to see life for their children to come. Makes sense to me, but Humala condemned it. He also said he condemned the political slogans on the coffins. Outrageous propaganda, he called it. Anyway, Mr. Seifert, who got the beating, but fortunately I didn't. In the end, they found the right guy. They thought he was a traitor because he was frustrated with the local organization running the people's movement. In fact, at one time he went a bit too far, perhaps, and suggested they submit themselves to psychotherapy because he really didn't like the way they were conducting things. Also, there were rumors about that he had a very sumptuous house with private servants, and so there was some thought that maybe he was using the movement to benefit personally. Anyway, he came out with a statement that said the beating that was administered to me will only help Lima and President Humala because that'll give him a good excuse for even a harder crackdown. And then Father Orana, the guy who was carted off to jail, remember the guy who didn't want any gold objects in his church and saw the gilded ceiling in Rome? He got out of jail and he's at it again.
And what?
He's at it again. He's continuing the struggle. Okay. A bright note, shortly after I left, not too long after I left, in August 2012, the Cajamarquinos, the people of Cajamarca, won around in this long, deadly fight. Lima declared that they were putting Mina Conga on the back burner until they could, get guarantees from Newmont of greater safety and efficiency and things like that. Anyway, on the back burner. And finally, Newmont can't be stopped. They affirmed recently that Cerro Quilish, remember the operation they shut down in 2004? Newmont Corporation affirms that Cerro Quilich will be fully operational in 2016. And they're still pressing to have Conga push through. So that's more or less, in the interim, a couple of earthquakes about 4.5 on the Richter scale have occurred. Remember those tailings ponds? Okay, so earthquakes continue to occur in the region, and the fight goes on. And that's the end of my story. I thought people might like a break and we can have questions and answers, and then I can have a quick wrap up. Did you want to have just questions and answers? Do you want to get up and stretch? Or? Pardon me? Yeah. Why don't we take a couple of minutes break and come back, and then we'll have questions and answers. Did I get it down? How long did it chopped it by 15. You know, the story takes some time. The cold has been with us for many thousands of years. Okay.
You grew up in Florida?
No, I didn't. I grew up in Texas, actually.
Do you think the sound is going to be audible on this?
I don't know. All right, maybe I'll just give it to you.
Okay, who has questions or comments they might want to raise?
Did everybody leave?
Yeah, I looked out there and there wasn't really anybody hanging out.
Well,
I have
Yeah.
a question
Okay.
about the cyanide.
pardon me?
Is there any hope?
Well, yes, I was hoping to, I was hoping for more people, but I was going to conclude my talk with that. Those are my ending comments. There's a woman called Maxima Cunha. In fact, Cliff just sent me an article, and since you asked the question, I'll go right to her picture. There she is. She's been under siege by the authorities. Yanacocha, they won't admit to it, but they've sent out armed thugs to pressure her. She's been threatened with jail.
How recent is this?
This is just this December 2014.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And she actually won her court case. They're not going to throw her off her land. And this was in a Peruvian court, if you can believe that. So there is hope. I mean, little hope. I mean, Yanacocha, i.e. Newmont Corporation, or whatever I do it, are fully vested in eventually exploiting Conga and Cerro Quilich. They fully plan to do it, but there are rays of hope, like this woman who won her case in the Peruvian courts. Yes, go ahead.
Nick, remember the film we saw yesterday, which is the Ecuadorians, indigenous Ecuadorians fighting the oil industry, fighting Chevron, Texaco, things like this. And the final decision isn't in, but they've made headway. And the Kayapo, it's a similar kind of thing, contaminated water supply. You know, and they will be dead. Yes, they certainly were alive.
Now, there was yet another death. Because Cliff, you sent me the message with that exact message. Another death. Okay? In fact, they killed an ecologist. So the risks are very, very real here.
No, the risks are huge, but it needs, what I think is needed in answer to the question is people who are willing to take risks, people who are willing to organize.
Mm-hmm.
And
in this case, many thousands.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's unique. Well, I think it's somewhat unique about this, is there are many, many thousands of people willing to risk everything.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, just in case there's another mass exodus, I would really appreciate two things. If you know of anyone who would like me to speak on this topic, please let them know. And also, if you would, please visit my website, read the entire essay if you want to. But most of all, please leave a comment on my site. These comments help immensely to promote the work and to get the word out. So if I'll give you the site name and all the information you need. Yes, go ahead.
Are there any people, like in the case that David's speaking of, that are gringos that have donated their time to be attorneys and help them? Or are there any people from Greenpeace or,
I don't know of
use
any-
them as an
you know, this
example,
is,
because they're not all good.
What I saw there was mostly local people, lots and lots of local people involved. Donating time, there are a few people here and there. In fact, the woman who got the green banner, which I didn't show you photos of, there was so much to tell I had to cut it down. Cliff says not enough. There's a big, huge banner that stretches block after block after block, and communities around Peru have sewed onto it. And they march under, and it marches under many thousands of people through the city. And I believe it was a woman from New Zealand who got that started. So there is some, and I saw a couple of marchers, 2 German girls, and they got into the spirit of things and dressed in their native traditional costume from their area of Germany. But very little of that. This is basically, the people really know what's at stake, their livelihoods, okay? Their way of life, their water. And for, when they look at these lakes, these alpine lakes, they just don't see a water source, which will disappear under the mines. They see a sacred tradition, a generationally sacred tradition that has been passed on from generation to generation. So they see it differently. They really do have another mindset when they look upon their geography. And Yanacocha got in because I think they, had the people known what Yanacocha would look like and how devastatingly it would be, they would have marshaled their forces against Yanacocha. The people were bamboozled. There'd be more jobs, things would be better. They didn't know they'd be fighting houses of prostitution and see all their fish killed. They didn't know that there'd be mercury spilled along the highway for 25 miles. These are simple people. They didn't know. Yes?
I got 2 questions. One is, which direction does it have? Which side of the Continental Divide is this mine on? Does it flow west?
On the eastern side. Most of the water will flow into the Amazon tributary.
Into the
tributaries.
Amazon basin. The other question is, what's your relationship today between Newmont and the Peruvian government?
Very cozy. Always has been. That guy, I didn't show you his picture because I was trying to cut it down, but there's a guy named Kurlander who used to work in, I think, the New York State Department of Justice under Governor Cuomo, and he was hired as an executive at Yanacocha, and they basically told him, go. There was a French company, I believe, that wanted to sell a significant interest in the company to an Australian mining company, and Yanacocha didn't want that kind of competition. Okay? So they put a lot of pressure. They sent him, and they actually have recorded interviews or telephone conversations going back and forth between Montesinos and Kurlander, and promises that, well, Kurlander says, Mr. Montesinos, you have a friend of life, and Montesinos says, oh, the French connection, you have a friend of life too, Mr. Kurlander. So, and this goes back and forth. So it's very cozy. And in fact, Yanacocha has the controlling interest, and they bought out the French at such a tiny, tiny fraction of what, they bought them out for $115 million, if you can imagine that. Initial investment of $5 billion, and they bought them out for $115. The relationship is very tight. And remember, Montesinos worked for the CIA.
Well, is it a significant source of revenue to the national government?
Theoretically, supposedly they pay massive taxes. They claim paying massive taxes, and I'm sure they might. However, when this all started, when Yanacocha started in 1993, they were the 6th most poverty-stricken area in Peru. And now, after 20-some years of the mine operating there, they're, let's see, I believe they were, now I think they're 4th down the list instead of 6th. They've actually grown poorer over time, over the last 20 years, than when Yanacocha moved in. So the people look at this and say, the prosperity we were promised? No, it's not there.
I should mention, I'm from Denver, which is the world headquarters for Newmont.
Uh-huh.
And my neighbor is a hydrologist with Newmont.
Yes.
And he's a real straight engineer kind of guy.
Uh-huh.
And he has part of a team that specializes in surface water,
Mhm.
the effluents from that mine.
Yeah.
It goes back and forth in that mine. That's part of it. It appears from this straight guy that they're really making a serious effort to do what they can with
Right,
these
and that was part of my, those are part of my wrap-up comments. You know, there are these massive protests, the people don't want the mine, but you should sit, and Yanacocha really does operate within specified regulations. I mean, they really do make an effort. Accidents happen, wholesale destruction of topography happens, lakes and rivers and streams disappear, water gets contaminated, all these things happen, but they are operating under regulations. There's an entire branch of mining. Well, by the way, this is the Grasberg mine. I think you should see this, 14,000 feet deep. This is in Indonesia. You should know that this is a worldwide phenomenon. There are mines all over the world. I can show you the list of open pit mines if you'd like to see it. And remember those big trucks I showed you? Remember how big those trucks are? That's at the top of the crater. Man-made, by the way, 14,000 feet deep. That gives you the, this is what we're looking at worldwide, in many Africa, Indonesia, Ghana, Norway. This is in,
Those two pictures of this one mine,
yes, this is it.
Grasberg.
Grasberg, and it's in Papua province in eastern Indonesia. Anyway, that's the mines.
Yeah, that's in this.
Oh, this is something I got to show you before I get to those pictures. Part of my closing comments. India sucks up most of the world's gold, the newly produced gold. And there's a guy whose shirt weighs about 6 pounds or so. His shirt is valued at $250,000, and he has bodyguards tailing him all around. And he loves his shirt. He said people invest in homes, they buy portions of the Riviera, they buy a fleet of Porsches. I like gold, so this is what I did. And you know what? A lot of people in India like gold. I mean, this is what they aspire to. This woman's body is actually buckled under the weight of the gold she's carrying. And you can see by the very intense yellow color of the gold, this is probably very, very high-grade gold, you know, not mixed with a lot of alloys. So she's actually buckling under the weight of it. And this is the, I think that this is from National Geographic, and they do have a way of capturing little details. This woman walking around with a cell phone, which has a tiny bit of gold in it, about 50%. And her daughter, this is the real one. And in the back you see a bazaar, all kinds of junk imported from China, really cheap plastic junk. And this is what you aspire to in India. And everybody owns gold in India, even the very, very poor, because sometimes they don't have enough money to open a bank account. So they have a few grams of gold instead. That's their hedge against inflation. That's their protection in days to come. Gold is maniacal. It's a maniacal obsession. This is what I was saying. This is unregulated mining. This is what it looks like when the government has no say, when they aren't making efforts to adhere to the regulations you mentioned. This is what naked gold mining looks like. This is the Madre de Dios area and the Peruvian Amazon. And this is what it looks like. And they use mercury amalgamation. That is, combining gold with mercury. They dissolve gold and mercury and then boil the mercury on site to get at the gold. And every one of these streams you see here is swimming in methyl mercury. And how much is being destroyed every year? Remember, the size of the Yanacocha mine is 60 square miles, actual operation, right? They destroy rainforests like this and artisanal gold mining to the tune of 707 square miles per year. So as, you know, we've discussed the problems with Yanacocha. This is what 25% of the world's mining looks like. I think that's something to bear in mind. These are the people. Oh, and I think you should know how much these people are paid. As I was discussing with Cliff the other day. Oftentimes they give them a sack once a month, or I think it's once a month. And they tell them, go and collect as much ore as you can, and then take it to the assay office and see what you've got. They don't get any salary or wages. Okay? And so oftentimes they're working for free. They take the sack, The guy does the assay, drops the gold out of the ore, says, sorry guy, not this time. Didn't strike it rich. So they're really playing the lottery. They're getting a lottery ticket for their efforts. This used to be rainforest.
Oh, no.
This is the Peruvian Amazon. This was rainforest. Kind of makes Yanacocha look like a socially responsible operation, doesn't it? I mean, they just take everything. Oh, by the way, the Peruvian government has slated this area as an ecotourism spot.
What?
Yeah, somewhere, either on the edges or they're going to replant, or they want to make it, because this is located in one of the most biodiverse areas of the world. That's what it looks like. 7.7 square miles per year. I think we have to realize how destructive gold is. And I mentioned India uses up, absorbs most of the gold, new gold production, along with China. China threatens to surpass India. I think you have to realize there's one important statistic I may have not mentioned, that estimates, and they do vary, but estimates run like this. 90% of the gold is used for jewelry and hoarding. That is, people buy gold, put it in vaults, and it could be governments too, like China's doing, and put it in vaults as hedges against inflation. Insurance against what could happen in the future. Okay? 10% of the gold is used in industry. About $9 estimated in a laptop or a computer, about 50 cents in a cell phone, some in dentistry, and some minor use in the medical profession, gold salts to treat arthritis and such. Okay? But very little there. So, necessary uses for gold, that we might deem necessary at least, are minimal. Extravagant, needless, vain uses of gold accounts for most of it. Let's see if I have any more pictures here. That's in Incan. I mean, the devastation just goes on for endlessly. Yes?
Yeah, Cliff mentioned Naomi Klein's book, and that title seems to be very appropriate for the collection of pictures, the photographs that you've shown. This should change everything in terms of that community and the
Well,
effect of gold
I don't see
change.
how we can.
Will it change everything?
I don't see how we as human beings can look at this. Look at the figures. Look at the way gold is used. I mean, staggering, 10% of the world's energy? Up to 50% of toxic emissions, and we're not concerned? It can't be. I mean, and aluminum. And you've seen those millions of cans being poured out. Aluminum uses even more energy than gold.
Do they have any people that
Specifically in electricity, right? Go
Do
ahead.
they have any people that have the charisma of a king or someone that can, Martin Luther King, that can really bring the people together to bring the message out and to stop this corruption, every level of government, business?
Corruption? I don't want to sound a cynical note, but corruption has been with us forever. I don't really see an end to corruption ever.
But in this
I think
situation,
go ahead. Go ahead.
are the protections going to be there so that the people can survive and it doesn't end up like the first mine that you were talking about, the Congo? Will the area of the Congo?
Well, open pit mining sort of defines itself.
Right.
Right, overburden is the rock above the ore. And you have it really isn't worth it in time and material and money to go in and dig under to get a deeper core when it's so close to the surface. I mean, it might be 100 feet down, it might be 50 feet down. You saw in that, those people scrambling for those grams in the rainforest, Madre de Dios and the Amazon of Peru. I mean, they're not going down very deep to get at the ore. Now, in the case of Grasberg, they're going down 1,400 feet. Well, you know, digging down 1,400 feet and caving and doing the hard rock mining underground is a much more expensive operation. One of the costs you have to settle is air conditioning. In South Africa, for example, they're going down to incredible levels to get the hard rock that contains the ore. And air conditioning, you know, they're so close to the Earth's mantle that they cannot withstand the heat. And so they absolutely have to have air conditioning. Now, in times past, they didn't bother with that. There was no air conditioning. They just worked until they dropped dead.
I was going to say the price of gold now is down to $1,200 a troy ounce. That the gold market's collapsed for the people that think they can make money on it. Apparently, it's never been a money-making thing. It's more like you said, hoarding. I had a mother-in-law that died that had tens of thousands of dollars.
The gold miners themselves are doing fine.
Yeah. But I mean, the hoarding thing, I mean, over my lifetime, I met one woman who bought a house and they tore up the floorboards and found $20,000 worth of gold under the floorboards.
Well, that's it.
And so
hoarding.
there are people that are basically hoarders who,
Yeah, well, it has much more to do with psychology.
and survivalists, right? And the preppers, they're all into, you know, because they think the currency's going to fall apart, and so they're going to pull it out.
Yeah. Full-page advertisements in magazines.
Right.
By the way, this is my website where you'll see this is my website, imnicolo.com. You know, if you would do me the very kind favor of leaving a comment on my site, it would be deeply appreciated. So it's just IEYE, Nicolo with two C's.com. Yes?
Do you have any information on gold mining in Africa?
I do have some information, although most of my research has been in South America.
How about Mexico?
Well, we talked about Guerrero yesterday. There's going to be something, there's evidently ritual in Guerrero. So they may be opening their mind there. I've also heard tale of some very, very rich mines in Sonora. Very rich indeed. I mean, we're talking more than the minimal 0.5 parts per million here. We may be talking 5 and up. So makes it, you know, somewhere in boardrooms they're licking their chops.
Are they still pulling gold out of Guanajuato?
Well, actually, silver has always been Guanajuato's mainstay.
Yeah.
And all throughout, in fact, they call it El Camino de la Plata.
Yeah.
And it stretched from Mexico City all the way to Zacatecas. And silver was what they're mostly pulling out.
Silver and
And
gold.
they used mercury amalgamation for that too.
Wow.
And are they still doing so?
Are they still? They're still mining, but they no longer use mercury amalgamation. You know, cyanide is the industrial standard. Some people have drifted away from cyanidation, okay, heap leaching with cyanide, and are using other methods. But the latest statistic, and correct me if it's changed in the interim, is about 90% are still using cyanide leaching in the gold industry.
There's always been a legend in Mexico that the government knows where all the gold and silver is and is hoarding it or something in the ground. And but I think it's more of like a folk
I
legend.
think so too. I would think that
all the
it's
easy
being
stuff.
hoarded into the ground until it's economically feasible to extract.
Yeah.
Although there's the great legend of Cortez. Remember Cuauhtemoc? I don't think he's on one of these videos. They burned his feet. Do you remember the last emperor of Mexico? They put his feet to the fire, literally, and said, "Where's the gold?" Because La Noche Triste, remember when the Spanish fled across the causeway out of Mexico City after being badly beaten in the battle by the Aztecs? They were driven from the city, Tenochtitlan. Well, the Narvaez's troops, those he had recruited in Veracruz when he went down to put down the arrest party directed by Panfilo Narvaez, and then brought them back. Well, anyway, those are the guys cut up, and those are the guys who took the most gold. And they stuffed it into their pants and their shoes and their armor. And when they went down to the bottom of the lake, they took the gold with them. Cortez came back, as you know, in 1521, August, I believe it was, and said, "So where's the gold?" Evidently, it wasn't there anymore. I don't know what happened to it. And Cuauhtemoc said he didn't either, and that's why he got the burned feet.
Whoa.
And Cuauhtemoc is the quintessential Mexican hero. While they were burning his feet, his second in command turned to him and said, you know, this is horrible, they're killing us. You know, I don't think I can stand this torture anymore. And Cuauhtemoc says, so, and how about me? You think I'm taking a walk through a rose garden? Yes. A bit of humor in a very tragic moment in Mexican history.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, Mike? So, seriously, I would very much appreciate a comment. Here's, you can read everything here, inicolo.com. And just let me see here. And there will be dead. You can just go right to the essay. There it is. Just click on it. It's the very last one on the list. That should work. Maybe.